For the applicant's flat. No, there's no formal inspection, I'll see. No. They're not, it just holds the board, yeah, where's the don't work, say. Hold the nice things, how years, 5 years. 5 years. Well, just said, the terrible. He said, I didn't think you were gonna be here, I said, that's a good excuse to get away from my life. That's what's showing. What do I like to see? You and just gonna shoot. Sorry, thank you, Paul. No, no problem. Well, based on our conversation, it didn't sound like there was any major issue. I do, I mean, there were the issue with it. Like I said, I saw Justin last Wednesday, right? He had said, geez, you just need to sign the damn, you know.
No, I assume that any riprap is on the structure of the floodplain.
As soon as you can.
Yes, that would be.
Because the
It's good.
ordinance also says develop, structure or development.
Yeah,
It's,
that's what I was.
so granted, 90% of it still doesn't apply because it talks to buildings and it talks to different things, but there are references to piers and wharfs and other.
Right.
things. But the essence of it is that a professional engineer's primary job is also to verify all of the referenced elevations. Because everything involved in all of these applications is critically based on elevation.
Right.
And I'd like that ask Paul something if he's
Address that, I didn't address it to him,
issued like plan.
and then
Yeah, it's a good question.
this is out of flood. Sorry.
Well,
certificates for the others projects.
Yeah.
And if so, obviously the representative had a cover letter from the PE on top.
right.
And that, what his, you know.
For review and
Because by and large, a lot of his stuff can be over by the parents.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
That's a,
And that pulls back a lot of the
I mean.
requested stuff, so we don't need to change our track.
Yeah.
Good evening. Yeah, that's the issue that's. That the issue with that. Yeah. A little bit. Brother. Clean up. We got the engineers. Yes, you look good. I'm fine with some. And you know, that's hard to do. I'll be good.
To contain within these decisions on this one and the
Yeah.
other. Is the single line at the bottom.
yes,
For what we referenced.
right. And ready to go. Yeah, take,
Minutes,
that's all right. Take 2 minutes, we'll be going.
No. Point. So. That's like right, so being started. But now it's been. Sure.
The other one, it was where do you store the seasonal piece? Yeah, that's. See any big deal there either. So you're so talented with build those things that you'll put wheels on them somehow.
Yeah, it's a good conversation. Yeah. I didn't have a chance to practice that. Should.
There we go. All right.
Probably gonna wait and see what happens to us. Big note.
We're good to go. The last. So we're gonna call the meeting to order. This is the planning board, the January 12th, 2026 meeting, at which we're going to hear continuation of the public hearings we had on the Ralph and Ruth Reagan Realty Trust shoreline stabilization application. And then the application on behalf of Indian Island Company for the boardwalk at the Hook. There should be a number of materials there. Originally, we intended this to address the fact that we were still waiting for the Coastal Waters Commission to address the matter, which they have to do before we can pass judgment on anything. They've done so, and we've received copies of those materials. But in addition, it seems like there's a number of other materials that have come in some instances. Some of the plans, some of these slight modifications, it looks like, to things, and we'll walk through those. So we'll start. In addition, Paul Demers had sent an email with a number of thoughts he had on possible conditions. And so we'll want to talk about those too. And that's why I wanted Paul here, because he sent an email today on those things. And so we need to understand what he's thinking about there and talk about what is required, if those are necessary, which ones are. So with that, welcome, and we're gonna launch right into the Reagan application. And so Mike, turns over to you to take us through anything new that we've got in front of us. Let's start with that. And then a bunch of stuff came in today, didn't necessarily make it through because we had some issues in forwarding materials that they got caught in at one point or another before getting over to Paul. So in some instances, it printed some things out for him to look at, and so we'll see if any of them matter or if they're not consequential.
Sure.
Take it away.
Sounds very good. First, I'm gonna apologize for my voice. It's day 30, whatever this cold was going around, and I still have a little touch of laryngitis. Shouldn't be contagious, but I'll still keep my distance. My name is Mike Morris. I'm here on behalf of the Ralph and Ruth Reagan Realty Trust. Owns property at 12 Walton Beach Road, here on the island. And as we discussed at the last meeting we met regarding this, the folks, the applicant would like to conduct some shoreline stabilization to address some fairly substantial shoreline erosion issues stemming from the January 10th and 13th, 2024 storm events that devastated a lot of the shoreline here on Shabig Island. Just as a quick update, all we have submitted, since that meeting, the last meeting, is the DP and Army Corps of Engineers permits. There was some discussion about that at the last meeting. Had we applied, had we received our permits? So we wanted to make sure you guys had copies of those permits. And then the only other thing that we've submitted that comes quickly to mind is we've submitted the CEO applications, the floodplain application, along with a letter from an engineer. There's discussion about that at the last meeting. That's a requirement of the floodplain ordinance. A letter from the engineer discussing that this will not impact the floodplain, the map floodplain or otherwise. So we've submitted that as well, along with the building permit application. So that, assuming that the planning board would approve the matter tonight, the CEO could then issue permits and construction can begin fairly soon if possible. So that's what we have submitted since the last meeting. Be happy to discuss any of that, or be happy to run through more of the details of the meeting all over again if you'd like that as well.
No, I just want to make sure I understand some of the things. So the last time when we met, you had submitted it was a permit by rule, a permit that you received under NERPA, and you had submitted the approval, but we asked you also for the application materials that went with that, and that's what you've submitted here, right? That's
We submitted all of it, the approvals with the application.
yes.
Yes.
So that's what I'm looking at here.
Sure.
So in terms of that, and all that is consistent with everything you said at the hearing
Sure.
that I've seen. The other materials, I see there's the letter from where did it go? The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers self-verification notification form. And that's just basically, there's nothing new there, although we didn't have that form for it, or
Just
just.
have the signature page, you didn't have the rest of the application.
Right, we had the signature page, but not this. So this is just the actual application.
Correct.
Okay, so, and we had the notification back saying, yeah, it looks good,
Yeah.
you're under the self-notification form. And, all that looks consistent with everything you said before. And then, the last thing that I see in connection with this, I don't remember seeing before, but maybe I just missed it, was the Fish and Wildlife Services Department of the Interior, basically a letter saying there's, indicating the issues. You had addressed these on your form, but we didn't have the letter before, right?
Right. That's part of the Army Corps application. We have
Okay.
to provide, with any application to the Corps, we have to provide a species list.
Okay, so that was part of the Army Corps of Engineer
Correct.
process. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood these
Sure.
documents as to what they were, which is the expanded version of everything that we asked you to do.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So I guess I'll start. I just want to clarify those things. Start by turning to Kyle, see if you had any questions.
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Paul,
We had public testimony at the last public hearing. Abutters who expressed concerns about potential impact to their property. Mr. Lickett spoke to the very commonly acknowledged end effect erosion with solid riprap. Oftentimes, when an abutter expresses specific concerns to that, the applicant will make modifications to their design to try to alleviate those concerns. Has any action been taken in that manner, or?
We have not made any, good question, we have not made any additional changes as a result of those comments. I had a part of what I discussed at the last meeting with you folks, and then I had a conversation with Mark afterwards. Is the method for addressing that issue is by maintaining at least the 5-foot setback from a property line from the end of your riprap or hardened structural stabilization to the property line, and then beyond that, you taper the riprap, so that it's not a.
I can only act on what was presented to us here at the last public hearing. I appreciate the fact you guys had a conversation, but your application showed a 2-foot taper.
Right,
Okay, that was the extent of your taper, was a 2-foot taper. And I'm not trying to design it, but we've seen a host of different solutions and different materials and different approaches to address this, and the concern is really that the abutters brought this up.
right.
Good comment. I think you specifically said we could maybe move it from 2 feet to 8 feet in the last meeting.
Right, and that's, I was asking if there were additional design considerations.
I just want to clarify one point. The taper is only 2 feet into the right of way. So the taper actually starts further back, further onto the Reagan property, before, the taper starts further back.
So the right of way is on the Reagan property, or it goes across the edge of the property, I'm assuming.
Right, Reagan's own half of that, and then, pardon me,
So,
somebody else owns the other.
so the right of way is split between, the chutes. So it's, the right of way is 15 feet, 7.5 goes to the chutes property, which is, down here. And then 7.5 feet was ours. The beginning, so it's not. Riprap is starting 5 feet from the center line of the right of way, then tapering off from there. So there's actually, the butters is, this is next to the chutes.
Thank
So
you.
there's actually 15 feet, or roughly 15 feet before, you approaches their property.
That's-
So I don't know what kind of, I don't know if we really know what kind of action is gonna happen in that corner of the riprap, or the edge of the riprap. We're following the design aspects of was published in last summer.
This design follows the tapering, and the setback from the property line follows the direction of the main geological survey, coastal geologists, marine geologists, and the DEPs.
Right, and I tried to phrase my question carefully.
Yeah.
Not to say who designed it or why, but more of a response to a concern from an abutter
Sure.
about a relatively known effect of a hard face stabilization, that's all.
Sure. So did my response satisfy your question? or-
You guys provided information, we'll
Okay,
go for it.
very good.
I do need some help, and maybe Paul Demers can assist with the, our floodplain ordinance as currently written requires a professional engineer's submittal for, structure or development, I think that's the way it's phrased, in the floodplain zone.
Correct.
So a floodplain certificate would be required for this.
So he has submitted already.
Yeah.
What this would, being in a VE zone and going through the decision tree, this one would qualify for a minor permit.
Mhm.
And the minor permit still needs the engineer to certify to them. They've provided that as well.
Good, and thank you. One of the key things, I think, as it currently exists in our ordinance, and it calls out the requirement for the PE, was to essentially certify all the drawings and the references elevations. I mean, all of these projects are critically based on elevations. So is that part of what you have received?
What the letter I do have is addressing the plans as a whole. It's looking, his primary focus was on the mats that'll be used in the flood zone. The rest of everything is beyond the flood line. And so what's the current flood maps, or the most adopted recent flood maps? So what you have is below the HAT, you've got the pad that they'll store the rock on, that they're using the materials and their equipment will work off. And that's what is technically the only part of this that's technically in the flood zone.
Correct. And, but I think it all ties back in the way it's written in our ordinance, where is HAT? Right, on a relatively flat surface.
It's, there is an identify, and Mike's plans identify that
Okay.
HAT. And that's a given by our friends at DEP when they establish that and give you that elevation.
I just want to clarify one thing. With respect to the engineer's letter, he did look at the temporary mats, which should not be present during a flood condition anyway, that they'll remove those as a temporary. But the riprap is within the flood zone, or part of the riprap on the slope is within the flood zone, and the engineer looked at that as well. Just to clarify for the record.
One corner bar. All right, in the flood zone, yes. Slightly above the.
Do you have any other questions?
If, and when you think it's appropriate to address the recommendation.
Yes, I was gonna turn, when you were done, I was
I
gonna,
have questions on the application.
okay, so, we can turn to, thank you, yeah,
Sure.
please.
Thank you.
Want to turn to Paul Demers, CEO, because Paul, today sent an email, listing a bunch of, conditions that he thought might be appropriate. So I wanted to walk through those and understand what you're getting at there. The way, I understand it is you, and here, this is how I've broken it down, but you tell me if I'm missing something here. Is one, a site meeting that incorporates 6 different or 7 different elements: staging, schedule. That would have certain people at it, including the contractor, the designer, and perhaps the owner. You would have it happen prior to staging. Any materials on site. You would want this meeting to address how you deal with storm conditions that arise in terms of anything that's staged in the floodplain. And finally, a final walkthrough after the project is done. I included all these in the site meeting, maybe they shouldn't be there, but that's, just walking through exactly how that happens, that would happen as part of it. In addition, you want to address planting, in terms of how, the vegetation holds up, basically, with certain landmarks in that you want to look at. And finally, I have confirming adherence to, the way I view it is adherence to this approval, basically.
Correct.
Adherence to what we approve, which is basically what the DEP has approved. Is that correct?
Yes.
I mean, 'cause we're assuming that, that the site is substantially similar, or the approval is substantially similar to the drawings provided by the DEP that they've approved under the permit by rule. So, does that pretty much sum up the Reagan?
Essentially, yes, what I expect is Mike, give me a jingle when the contractor's getting ready to roll. And let's meet on site, walk through, make sure we're all looking at the same set of plans and we're all working towards the same end. And just get an idea on timing. Just this project being a much smaller scale project than the ones we're dealing with other properties on the island. I would expect this to be a much quicker, I mean, in the discussions with Mike, you're dealing with 95 feet of work. I think the staging is probably gonna take as much time as most of his construction, but so if you had an extended period, as my original suggestion with the other two projects you've seen recently, I would have suggested some oversight beyond just my Wednesdays on the island. But in light of this one being what I would say is a pretty tight time frame, I would expect that I could hit that when I'm on the island. And if we have a pre-construction meeting, have an understanding with the contractor for him to be able to send me some pictures if needed and just keep me apprised of what's going on. And if something goes crazy, obviously I could make a trip out if need be. But having that pre-construction meeting to kind of set the stage. I did that with the other two projects that are underway. I think it was a big help at least getting, because I won't know any of the contractors generally on the island until I get here, so this would be a good way to kind of acquaint. And then in the situation of getting his materials out on the island, whether he's hauling them in by barge or if he's hauling them in with the ferry. It doesn't matter to me, but at least we'll know how he's gonna get there and just have a clue. After that, once the construction's going, again, I'll be out here a couple of times during, I would expect, the time frame. And then at the end, he's got a planting schedule. The concern always with these things is contractor gets done, heads off site. What do? So the owner's got a responsibility to at least try to make sure that the vegetation that gets planted survives. And that's a commitment in terms of some watering or whatever at the initial stages, at least for the first year or so. But then by the end of the summer, maybe doing a recap with the owner, meeting on site and walking through and seeing how things have survived. But the only other item that was in my list that you mentioned is, as Mike said, they generally wouldn't have the pads in place during a major storm or flood event. I just want to make sure I know, these guys being a short window can look at the weather situation and try to beat that if it is coming. I know one of the other projects was all barge related, and they did move the barge out during an incoming storm. I just want to know that I'm standing there to kind of make sure everybody's on the same page about how he would address the storm situation.
I guess, thank you, Paul, for the explanation of that. We just got the material this afternoon. I had a chance to read through it, and I hope others did that were involved with it. You also offered us a lot of comments on the previous applications. I think the ones you've called relatively large.
Yep.
So to be consistent, in the findings of fact and conclusion of law on those, this planning board was comfortable with issuing the review on that in a positive manner, subject to one condition. And that condition was that the applicant or its representatives notify the town of schedules and activities and have a physical meeting with the town CEO prior to the beginning of the construction process. Given that those were two relatively large projects recently approved, and that one condition was more than adequate to get those underway, I'm curious as to why the extreme level of detail here that you made a request for.
I mean, the request is more just giving you some detail of what I would anticipate the flow of this project like it has been with the others. One of those other projects has moved along quite a bit. I have monitored that one on a weekly basis, taking a quick rundown and getting some photos and just seeing where the progress is. I would reinforce my comments during that meeting that you have more than just my once a week look. Because in that case, I'm in the midst of some work with that, one of those applicants right now to verify whether or not the plans are consistent. And it brought up some concerns, hence my being a little more detailed in my recommendations.
I guess the way I view it is that a condition of approval to have a physical meeting and a discussion of all of those elements is wise. But the actual content of that discussion is amongst the principals and specific to each project. So when we get to there and discuss it, I guess I have reservations about the extended list as conditions of approval.
I have a question for you, Paul, just to try and be more specific about things. So things like the storm considerations and dealing with mats and stuff, would that be typically part of the floodplain application process or not? Or is it more appropriate for this, and what's the difference? Because I think if the floodplain is the thing that gets people in the muck.
Yep, no pun intended.
Yeah.
I guess I was very pleased with what I saw on the project that is underway. When they did have, and again, theirs was extended, it's been a couple of months of construction, but during that window, they did have an awareness that a pretty serious storm was imminent. And I was pleased to see that they took the initiative to remove the barge. And so that's the prompting for the discussion here, that in the event that this one isn't going to be barged, I believe this one will be, will not have a barge placed on site. You'll have mats with material hauled to those mats. And in the event of a storm, I'd just like to know that they have a plan for stabilizing and securing those.
Okay, and then just a couple of other things, just so I understand it. You mentioned in this the kind of the final walkthrough, kind of clean up kind of where things are. I'm assuming that under the term, or again, is that something that would be typically under the floodplain? In other words, if you're putting things in the floodplain and leaving things around, would that be a floodplain permit question, or is that?
It would be,
Or let me rephrase it. Do you have the power under the floodplain permit to say, you guys left, 3 boulders and, whatever, sitting there on a mat, sitting there, you can go get it.
yeah, I would call enforcement.
Right.
I certainly, like everyone else, like to avoid those. Those are
Yeah,
time consuming, pain in the neck. And so having that discussion ahead of time and knowing that the contractor is a responsible individual and is gonna make accommodations in the event of a storm. In this case, I'm hoping the project isn't more than a couple of weeks as opposed to a couple of months.
Right.
So the chances are just general discussion, like you said, at the pre-construction meeting. And the closeout of this, when a project's complete, theoretically, I'm doing a final walkthrough with the applicant in some way and verifying that 100 boxwood plant, or winterberry have been planted, and boom, and then I walk away.
Right.
Once I've given you the CO, the problem is, if any of that vegetation dies, is somebody responsible for replacing?
Yeah.
Is there, and I believe during Mike's presentation at the beginning of this last month, he did offer up that there would be some potential monitoring for a year or 2 or 3 even, I think is what I had for notes, but.
Yeah, in your last phrasing, that to be, but in the semantics, you said you issue a CO, a certificate of occupancy associated with this. what requirement is there for closeout and what documentation is generated? And I'm trying to speak historically to the fact like the entire Hamilton Beach shoreline stabilization and a dozen other projects around this island that have been done recent years. How were they closed out? And what's our history as a town for handling these projects?
I don't
Yeah.
know your history as a town.
But I'm asking you for closeout, when you say CO, obviously I associate that with a building construction project.
Yeah.
What manner of certification or what do you
I,
envision
Sure.
from your own role
my
and
experience
responsibility?
with respect to an open permit
Mhm.
is closed when a certificate of occupancy is granted. Doesn't necessarily mean you are occupied, the project's done, the permit's closed. That's what a CO provides you.
Okay,
And I don't know, I can't speak to predecessors of mine in this role, but that's how I've handled them in 30 years of doing code enforcement, so.
So one more question, because this is the one that I was interested in connection with the confirming adherence to the approval, which seems critical, right? And it seems to get at the, you know, kind of a central issue and the question of whether or not you have to have you know, something done correctly to get that certificate of approval, whatever it is. But if something's not in compliance with the drawings, with what's been presented, it seems like that's a violation of the permit, right, or of the approval. And either they need to correct the issue or not get a certificate of
Not close
occupancy,
out the permit.
not close out the permit and certainly, you know, do that. What's so that's the concern, is the concern, how do you address that concern in a way other than, to me, I mean, there's two issues there. One is you're looking at it, the other is to say you gotta certify that it's in compliance with the drawings that you submitted.
And in some of these where there are engineering aspects that are things that I may not see or be qualified to review.
Right.
That's where you may look to the engineer to get a certification at the end. Generally, that's gonna be in a structural project where making sure the rivets are put where they belong, the nuts and bolts are all holding things together correctly. Those are the kinds of things that are outside of the scope of what the CO, the code officer should be doing. And in this case, yeah, I can tell you the wall is 5 feet high, or that it's 12 feet high now, and it was supposed to be 5.
Right.
Those are the kinds of things that are kind of obvious. But whether or not things like the method that they're choosing to vegetate, whether or not the owner has, or the contractor has put in all of the plantings that they said they were going to. Shy me reading a tag, I'm probably not the right guy. I'm not an arborist or a botanist to be able to tell you that that's a Rosa rugosa or a Virginia, Rosa Virginia, whatever. I mean, those are all wonderful things, but if I can't read the tag, I'm useless. So.
Great, thanks, that's helpful. Applicant,
Yes, please.
would you like to speak to any of these issues?
Yes, please. Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to respond. Paul and I had a phone conversation last week regarding this issue and I think what we had discussed, I think that we both would agree to is that with respect to the inspection would be to have perhaps an on-site meeting with a contractor who's not only the contractor, but also the company who designed the project. But to have an on-site meeting, the pre-construction meeting to kick it off with just them. I didn't feel it was necessary for me to be there. I'm certainly not an engineer, certainly not the owner. But we think that could be reasonable to discuss some of these finer points. Staging of materials, scheduling, the timing. certainly would be appropriate to discuss, with the contractor, designer. Storm conditions, we haven't discussed that here, with the planning board. You're not gonna find that level of detail in the planning board application because there are no standards within the ordinance, relating to that. If you'd like to discuss it, I'm happy to walk you through, what that would look like. And it's pretty simple, that they're not gonna be doing the construction during these astronomical high tides where water, with storm surge where the water is gonna be lapping the toe of the slope. They won't be operating during those times. During those times, if we have a storm event like that midway through the process, construction process, that is, any of the temporary construction mats that the equipment will operate on, and the equipment will be removed so that it won't be damaged by the storm surge or wave action, and then similarly, it won't cause more damage to the slope or the intertidal area. But those are things that I think could be appropriate, and I think Paul was agreeable to that. And I think the applicant would agree to a condition to that effect. Particularly because of the limited scope of this project. It's a pretty minimal project. We anticipate construction maybe a week. I think it could go on for 2 weeks, with some of the staging. With respect to the planting, I did not mention this in the last meeting. But just to clarify, so that this, the train doesn't get too far down the tracks on this. The vegetation planting, that we're proposing, is 10-foot strip at the top of the slope, is not a town ordinance requirement. We included that in the project plans because it is part of the project. Why is it part of the project and why are you seeing it? It's because it's a DEP requirement. DEP through Maine Geological Survey, for the past number of years have wanted to see vegetation planting at the top of the slope. And they just recently did some rulemaking to bring that into the DEP rules or DEP regulations under the Natural Resources Protection Act. So, excuse me, please, we've included this to satisfy the DEP, and because we also feel it's a good idea at the top of the slope to provide, where it's currently lawn, to provide a little more stability. The applicant is prepared to, after spending how much money to plant this, is planning to water it and to care for it and make sure that it survives. We would appreciate that there would not be any planning board condition that would require any monitoring for X number of years or anything of the sort, since there's no town standard behind this as a basis to require it in the first place. It will be monitored, will be cared for, so that it survives. That's our word. If that's good enough for the planning board, again, particularly since there's no standard to support it. Final walkthrough inspection, I think that's customary for a building or a commercial building or a residential building. This is, again, a fairly limited scope type of project. There's really nothing all that complex about it. It's a shoreline stabilization project. And if we could avoid extra time for a contractor to go back out for a final walkthrough, or for the, me or another consultant to go out as a walkthrough, or even the owner. If the owner's around and you want to do it on a Wednesday, I'm sure the applicant would be very accommodating and say, sure, I'll walk down. But to formally require that as a condition of approval, we respectfully request that that's not to be included, or if it is, that it's just included as a condition to be that. Other than that, I don't have any other condition, any other comments to make on those conditions.
All right.
Except that I do respect your comment, Mr. Valeska, that, if other projects have been held to this other fairly simple standard, or standard condition of approval, I would appreciate that it not be expanded to something much greater. So, appreciate it.
May I ask you a question as long as you're here about But the plantings, so there are DEP requirements. What does DEP require in terms of survivability or anything like that? Is there nothing that is stated in any of their standards?
There's no survivability clause. If this was a shoreline zoning violation, that's that shoreline zoning is a regulation here, one of the ordinances that the town administers and enforces. If we were cutting vegetation or removing vegetation in violation of the standards, then that's where a revegetation plan is required to satisfy the violation. The vegetation has to be planted, and then that would oftentimes require a monitoring requirement, or to ensure that the vegetation, I think it's like 85% or 80% of the vegetation remains viable after 3 years or 5 years, depending. But where this is not a violation, we're not removing the vegetation in the shoreline zone, it's not triggered.
The gas revegetation plan issued in this town by the DEP was actually against the town. And the town itself chose to ignore everything you just described, everything in the plan died. Nobody did a thing, so I think the precedent's been set by the town, by its actions. Interesting history. This is Again, not trying to bring another standard into here, but when you offer that explanation from DEP, that's the last time we had to deal with it, was a violation by the town itself.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
That's good. Any other comments from the public? In which case, you're gonna close the public comment portion and we'll talk amongst ourselves here. And we may call on you, Paul, for any questions. So well,
At the conclusion of the public meeting here, we're not gonna do findings of fact.
we're not gonna do, so what I'm gonna do, so here's my plan,
I just wanted to-
which is, right, which is in the big scheme of things, that's what I'm talking about. Because we're not gonna issue findings that concludes the law tonight, because we have to write those all up, and draft those and because we have a lot of new things here, because there's some things that need to be discussed. Write those up based on our conversation here and what we have for any conditions. My plan is, Kyle, if you're able to, in 10 days on Wednesday and want to get the date right, to meet again to finalize, and the 21st at 6 p.m. to finalize a decision. We'll see if we have a decision tonight. Oh,
You can't do 21st at 6 p.m. because the select board's having meetings.
select board's having a meeting.
You do Tuesday or Thursday, but you can't do Tuesday.
Tuesdays, problematic for me. Thursday, I could do.
Kyle, what you, every sense of
Kyle?
way,
Usually off island on Thursday, so we
Thursday,
do
so-
Monday the 19th. So
that's MLK, I'll be going.
How about well, we could either go for the 23rd or we could push it to the next week. I'm trying to not have it extend to yet another month.
Appreciate that.
And it has to be at least a week from the next couple of days, because we have to publish any decision that we come to, assuming we come to one.
So does that make it 26th?
We either go to the 23rd Friday or the 26th Monday. With
That is
either,
cool.
yes, so 26th, would that
that'll be
be,
something for us all to look forward to.
so 26th, is that 2 weeks from now?
There's another conflict on the 26th. I've got another.
Yes.
You said,
Board of
To
Appeals
be,
meeting.
to be polite though, this is your chance to offer information to us. When we sit down and go through findings of fact, conclusions of law, it's just the three of us speaking,
Okay.
speaking to whoever's in the audience.
right, at this, right, at this point, the public hearing's closed, we'll talk about that, make a decision. It's not a public hearing at that point. The public hearing portion is closed.
So no
And then we're
feedback.
deliberating.
Okay.
Right, so and essentially what we're gonna see is that tonight, if we have agreement, what,
I'm just wondering, will you, I mean, if you're able to deliberate, at least they're here to participate with that. And, this evening, if there are concerns or questions that will lead you to your findings, I mean, the findings of fact, essentially are listing out most of the items that are in the application and kind of reaffirming those, and then applying whatever conditions, either yay or nay, that you're gonna approve or disapprove the project.
I'm not sure what you're saying, Paul.
Is, you know, consider the deliberation this evening, as you're gonna discuss this. Now the public hearing's closed, instead of coming back on the 26th.
Well, so we're gonna discuss it here, we're gonna come to a decision, but we have to make written findings of fact and conclusions of law that we have to vote on. And to do that, we're not gonna be able to do that tonight, because wouldn't have been able to have all these things written out. So, what we'll do is come to conclusion tonight, then we'll make a formal writing of these and adopt those formally in 2 weeks, at which point that approval will exist. As opposed to tonight, when there wouldn't be an approval, because we wouldn't have the written findings, facts, and conclusions of law. Even though we might have a decision as to which way we're going.
Yeah, I was just anticipating that the deliberation was gonna happen on the 26th.
No, we're gonna do this right now.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, yeah. No, so the idea is we'd have those written findings, facts, conclusions of law then set, but right now we'll turn to making a decision and see if we can come to a decision on this and any conditions that we might impose on
Okay.
the approval.
We'd love to be able to be part of this discussion about conditions.
Well, at this point, the public hearing is closed, so right now, the only way you can come and talk to us is if we okay that.
Okay,
So we've heard from you on conditions, heard from Paul. If there's anything new that comes up, we'll certainly let you chime in.
I don't expect there would be, but I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'll just kick things off here. My sense is that they've met all the standards of this, and is there general agreement on that?
Yes.
And to me, it's just a question of the conditions that would be imposed. In terms of the conditions, I think some of that, I actually don't mind putting in some common sense things that we would make sure are to be on in the front of people's minds as part of that meeting.
That's what I.
I'm sorry, thank you.
And so in the past, when we did this with the last 2 applications, we required a meeting in person, a physical meeting, because we didn't just want a phone
Correct,
call.
and we all thought that was beneficial.
Right,
to
and-
everybody.
Right, it makes sense to have a meeting on site. I think that it makes sense to have that, to require an initial meeting at which, among other things, the staging, scheduling, timing of the thing would be discussed of the project, because that's what would be discussed. I think obviously the contractor, Paul had requested the contract designer and owner. I don't see that the owner has to be there. It seems like it's a technical discussion at that point, with the contractor and designer. I think that seems appropriate to me, that whoever's doing the work.
Reverted the applicant or its representative.
Correct, and I
Right.
think that's added, the existing phrasing addresses all of these.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense to have a contractor there.
Right, but the existing phrasing covers, okay, schedules and activities.
Schedules and activities and a
Basically-
physical meeting.
It's who's gonna attend and what are they gonna talk about, okay?
Oh, that's right. We did
And-
require that they notify of schedules and
Yeah.
activities, right?
So I think to expand the list of attendees and or try to define the topics for discussion is a level of detail that's not warranted past the requirement that they all stand on site and have a physical on site.
I guess, Attorney Paul, was there something missing from?
No, I'm just fine with your previous, the other 2 projects.
Yeah, the way that was phrased?
Yeah,
Okay.
the way you had it is fine.
Okay, that's fine.
My purpose by writing that out was to try to be helpful in explaining this so that you knew where I stood on this, and ultimately, I have no problem, again, like Mike said, we've had this conversation. I'm comfortable with, with
Right, okay.
with ducks in the room.
So as far as the storm question, it seems like a good one to have in your floodplain. They have to get a floodplain permit from you, and it seems like that's the appropriate place for you to say, give me your plan for how you're gonna deal with it if the water comes in, rather than make it part of this, make it part of that, unless you feel it's really important that it become part of this.
Not at all.
I mean, obviously they're hearing this, and it's a critical thing to understand, but that seems to me like something that's in your bailiwick already. And you should make sure they do that. So the planting issue, I'm puzzled by, but I'll leave it there. It seems like I'm not sure how we go about that enforcement, but I'll put that to the side and see what these guys have to say on that. The one thing I think it does make sense to do is to require a walkthrough at the end of the project. I mean, and this is a question, is that already
I'm
required?
going to do it anyway, regardless of whether it's a condition or not.
But then go ahead, Paul.
The only aspect of that I don't wanna say object to, I mean, Mike's characterization of it's a part of what DEP requires. It's a part of the plan.
Well, and that's all I was gonna offer, is that the reference to plantings is all there in the approval of the drawings.
Right, it's in the approval draft after there, it doesn't say, I mean, the issue is survivability of the plants, that's not something that we're addressing, and that's not something
Right.
DEP addresses. I'm not, other than making sure they're done appropriately and cared for, I don't know how to.
I mean, they put in one something bittersweet and call it good, it doesn't meet the drawing.
Right,
You'll call it out, but at that point, the investment in the plantings, it's up to the owner. This
Yeah.
is,
that's
I
it,
believe it's the town's responsibility through the planning board as a condition of approval to tell people to water the plants that they invested in to keep their shoreline intact.
right. I'm fine with that, and with just relying on the fact that people are spending a lot of money to put plants in, and because they're integral to the structure of the wall and how it works, that you want to protect them. I guess the last thing though is the walkthrough at the end to make sure to make sure the thing is the right size and the right shape, and everything's been cleaned up, and there's a plan for doing that. To me, that's appropriate.
It is appropriate, but in that regard, we just heard the code enforcement officer explain his practices, policies for how he closes out any permit. Any and every permit on this island gets a CO equivalent, okay, to close out an open permit. So whatever the activity is that was granted, approval, that gets closed out through the same process as everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one difference, because is you can't, if you don't get the CO in a building, you can't get your insurance, you can't live in the thing. And there's a natural isn't the right word, it's like you can't get there if you don't do the thing. Here, where you have a wall that's built and it's outside, and you say, yeah, I'm not getting my, I'm not.
I guess, but that's the
That
enforcement
becomes a
aspect.
violation.
Right,
Right.
but I'm comfortable in it, that the very same man is involved with enforcement, if enforcement is the tool that is appropriate at the time.
Right. I mean, I'm all for if someone's not built something in compliance with it, absolutely, then that would be enforced, and I would think that it would be problematic if somebody was to come back in here who was a contractor or designer and did a project and came in again after having done a project that wasn't compliant to ask to do another one.
To throw it's not a twist at this, but just I think something that folks that have been involved in the design of these types of projects, there may be variations that happen during construction. The DEP has a pretty clear process that says, we're approving this project the way plans are drawn. If you deviate from this, we want another shot at the apple. I'm just saying the same thing applies here. The other solution to either demanding they amend their project to match the plan, or treat it as a violation and go through that process. There are other options to come back to the board and say, gee, we needed to do this and this on this project that's slightly different than our original plan. We'd like to get your blessing on that. And
That seems appropriate.
exactly,
Yeah, it seems appropriate.
if they all went smoothly every time, we wouldn't need to do a lot of this stuff.
Geez, I'll hold my breath on the fines that are outstanding and violations already issued this time.
So basically what we're saying then is the existing conditions that we put on the other applications, it's similar conditions was placed on this approval, on that.
If you're asking for a consensus
Yes,
at this time, I'm very comfortable with the same condition of approval that was appended to the last two shoreline stabilization projects approved by this board. That's the language that I'm comfortable with.
right, which says, just to read it so that people can hear it, and we're all listening to the same thing, but basically that, a condition, subject to the condition that applicant or its representatives will notify, the town of schedules regarding activities and have a physical meeting with the town of Shabik Island code enforcement officer prior to beginning work to coordinate the construction process. And I guess the only difference there would be prior to staging, what you had said, staging of material or beginning of work. I think that would be the one difference. The staging material is that,
This, the materials are staged upland, they're not staged in the floodplain.
Well, no, they would be,
well, that,
if they, depending,
Yeah.
they could show up with a barge.
Well,
Tomorrow.
that's fine, but that's part of your discussion.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
I think it's, my opinion is, I think it's still adequate. Kyle, do you have any
Kyle.
observations?
Like,
There's one thing that. I wonder if you just may add one word to coordinate the construction process, it could say coordinate the construction and monitoring process, and Paul could talk about final, you know, like, hey, you're gonna be, I'm seeing you on Wednesday, you know, while you guys are still here. A minor change, but it's probably what's happening anyways.
Yeah. So right there,
construction and monitoring process.
I mean, I'm fine.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So they give you a little bit more clarity on the expectation that if nothing happened that's out of the what people see in the drawings and they hope that would happen. So it sounds like we're all in agreement on that. What I'll do is rather than vote tonight, just basically, I think we're in agreement that this would be approved with that condition as amended. There's obviously, we need to walk through all the specifics of what those are, but we'll do that at the next meeting. And that will confirm that we're all on the same page. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that we have to look at. I've looked at all those factors already. And each one of the things, I won't bother taking you all through it now because we'll do it at the next meeting. I sent us all those factors in that, but we'll walk through them in detail at the next meeting. It sounds like.
May I have just a second to make a
Sure.
Thank you. Just a quick question. And I'm not trying to change the process of the Shabik Island Planning Board if this is your typical routine, but if it's possible to vote for the project tonight or vote on the project tonight, so that we at least have a yay or nay, that could at least allow Paul to move forward with issuing his permits.
I don't think he could without he needs the written documentation.
Without the findings.
Without the findings of fact and conclusions of law, we can't really move forward, which is, we could walk through all the factors here and vote on them. It's still not gonna help you until we have a written findings of fact, conclusions of law. My understanding is we need at least a week of publishing those on the site according to our attorney last time. He said, put them up on the site for a week before you vote on them. So, yeah, exactly. That's what he said was the right thing to do. So it basically write them up put up the draft findings of facts and conclusions of law. And this is, you know, I don't think it's based on anything in there. It's based on probably on case law. It's his
Yeah.
suggestion.
Right, and
And then we would in 2 weeks have an approval. At that point, I would anticipate of the application.
I would assume there's a fair amount of material acquisition, logistics, planning, and everything else that can begin with an element of risk, though that element of risk has been clearly defined for you here tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how else to say it.
A lot of that logistical work has already been done,
Yeah.
with anticipation of moving this process forward and getting the approval from you guys tonight and, you know, naively on my part perhaps, and from Paul on Wednesday. And the only reason this is important is because we're just trying to get this project done before we run into a possible, the next storm. Where nobody knows when the next storm is coming, so we know it's most likely gonna be during the winter season, and we're well into that already, so. That's the basis for our comments and concerns. So if I understand the process correctly, you'll meet on the 26th to vote on the project and the findings of fact. And that'll satisfy the attorney's recommendation for, what would you say, 7 days or 10 days?
7, it's best to publish it 7 days in advance.
Okay,
And it'll also give us time to write up everything and then everyone can look at them, make sure there's no modifications. We'll vote on each of those factors at the meeting. And make any modifications that people think are appropriate, and assuming that it goes the way I would anticipate based on our experience and the application materials you submitted, that it would be approved with the conditions we discussed.
okay. All right, and the notification that the town attorney recommended would be after the draft findings have been.
Then what we'll do is, assuming we get through that all, and we're all in agreement, we'll sign them and hand them off to the town, and then the town will have our sign approval.
Okay. All right, I think, and then the notice, then there'll be a 10-day process after that. From the.
No, so from when we sign this in 2 weeks, when we sign that thing, we're done.
You're done.
And whatever appeals
Okay.
period begins to run at that point, that's your call on how you want to address that issue.
All right, and I apologize for sounding dense, but as town attorney recommendation is a new concept and I just am not familiar with it.
Yeah, he wanted us to publish it a week before, but it doesn't make any difference in terms of when we're gonna actually
Okay.
meet. We wouldn't be able to meet in any case.
But it's just a week before your next meeting on the 26th.
Right,
Perfect. All right. I think I get it.
is that good?
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mike. Sorry for the confusion there. All right, so we'll close the public hearing, or we'll move to the Indian Island Company public hearings. So I'll do it before that one. I'll continue this hearing to the next meeting. And we'll now,
Yeah, just for, you need to see it. I didn't
in
get.
case, yeah, this just came in.
Oh, thank you.
This is a slight change, so. We're gonna turn to the Indian Island Company application, for, the boardwalk at Cook. We, as, you know, similar to the last application, we received the application for your last time. We did not yet have the, coastal waters, written approval. They met on the 23rd of December, and we just received a while ago, a few days ago, the approval of the coastal, where the state coastal waters, that they have no issues with the application. And so, in addition, it seems like we have a few slight modifications to the application materials that we discussed last time. And if you can take us through that, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tim Forrest with Flycatcher. I'm here on behalf of the applicants, the Indian Island Company, as well as, Cumberland Street, Land Trust. So it's a partnership project here. We, after our last meeting, we did have a site visit with the code officer and went down and took a brief look at the project. To establish the starting point of the layout. While on site, we flagged out the area. I did collect some additional GPS points while I was out there. And then when I brought those back in and just overlaid on what I had done, I noticed the discrepancy in the text. So that has been corrected in the updated. And so we had originally permitted for a shorter portion. In actuality, it's 340, in total length. So nothing has changed on paper in terms of where this is located. It's simply a dimensional difference. And that's really the only thing. There was some discussion while on site about the methods for preparing the boardwalk or clearing the path. We talked about the idea of bringing in a mini excavator with a mulcher head, which could just walk right down through the center and do that. It isn't a wetland, that would be a piece of equipment in there. In my opinion, it would probably leave the vegetation in a little less desirable if it's done by hand. So we ultimately resorted back to clearing this trail by hand. Mulcher heads will kind of chew up and spit out the ends of the branches, and it's a less desirable look and less healthy for plants. If you lop them off nice and clean with a set of clippers and the node, then you have a better looking trail, a healthier plant, plants when you're done. So, actually Flycatcher, we've volunteered, on behalf of the Land Trust to come and help clear that trail. So we'll be part of the team tracking that. I think that's the end of it, so.
Okay. Just to clarify, the DEP letter that has a different square footage of impacts, direct and indirect, what was that?
That's the same discrepancy that's just been, that I clarified with DEP as well. So DEP just issued a corrective order. It's just changing the numbers.
Right, so it said approved.
Yeah.
So if I oversimplify it, the direct impact is the cumulative cross-sectional area of the support pipes, and the indirect is the walkway itself.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the pipes are 2-inch square pipes, or 6 feet of them. It's a pretty small direct impact, and then you have secondary shading impacts from the structure of the walkway itself.
So this has decreased the direct impact portion of that, as I recall.
Yeah.
So that was in the prior approval.
Yeah, the span distance, stuff like that, jumps the supports.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the important part is that it's all going right back in the same spot. It's just some numbers weren't correct. So we address that with both agencies.
Okay. I guess we're gonna get to the kind of some similar questions that Paul had on this one to talk about, but before we do that, do you have any questions?
No, no, what was just,
Kyle, do you have anything new? So Paul, in addition to the things we talked about before, the issues that that you had questions about were, one is the locations of the temporary sections. You know, where would those be located, as opposed to where you're gonna store them? The dates that those temporary sections would be taken and moved out, because they are temporary by their nature. They have to be moved. And then concerns about damage.
My point being is that if you're, the permanent section, you're gonna maintain whatever, there's vegetation growing through the slats, you're probably gonna keep that trimmed, but I wouldn't want, for their sake, I don't want to have them or someone question coming back and saying, well, gee, you can't clear this without going back to the planning board to reset these seasonal devices. I just want it somewhere clarified that this is gonna happen every year. And that you're not gonna get into a complication where someone says, geez, you can't put them back because you gotta go in there and clear all the vegetation again. I expect you have to clear some every spring when you put them back.
Yeah, I can address that. After that.
Yeah, I'm wondering what's gonna grow over the winter. That's where I'm going, okay? You pull them up in the winter, at the end of their 7-month period, you remove them. What vegetation would occur prior to placement of the temporary ones? So,
So not only that, but if you go out there now, there's almost no vegetation down in this area anyway. The reason why they're temporary is because they're technically within the coastal sand dune.
Right.
Where there are no permanent structures like this allowed. So that's why we proposed those last sections. It's actually, mostly consists of cobble and storm surge material that now has become quite compacted. So we may not even use all 3 sections in there. But that does get us to the end of where the beach starts on the other side, so those may not even be used at all times. But we did want them part of the application, so they are approved. The first one will definitely be used because we come out and have to transition off of the elevator walkway to get down to the ground surface. And it ends in a wetland, so we wouldn't wanna step into wetland, and that first section would definitely be necessary. And then in terms of storage, there's 2 thoughts right now. One would be to set a bracket on the side of the walkway itself, so those pieces could just be picked up and set on the side of the walkway. And the other would be that they could go down to the boathouse, so they'd be stored down. And additional vegetation clearing, I mean, this is part of the permit, we're allowed to clear and maintain that vegetative area. There will be plants that will continue to grow back in on the walkway, so seasonally that'll have to be maintained. But that would be on the responsibility of the land trust, and it's pretty common that they maintain their projects or stuff like this.
And when you say part of the permit, you're talking about the DEP permit?
Yeah.
And all the
Yeah.
conditions attached to that regarding erosion control and other things.
Yeah, I would expect that over time, there would be some vegetation that would creep in. I don't think things are gonna come up underneath the walkway. But I would expect some vegetation on the sides to grow in a little bit, crowd it in, if you will. But that would be probably years before you have to maintain something. I think those were all.
That's it.
Great. Okay, Alan, any questions?
No.
Any further questions? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
You're gonna close the public hearing now. You've heard all the discussion before about timing and everything. And we do a similar thing here, so turn down to the board for your thoughts on the application.
So it seemed to be, I mean, Paul was recommending the temporary, some clarity on temporary structures. And,
Time frame.
I think,
yeah,
If I could.
please, yeah.
If I
Oh,
could-
yeah, let's reopen for that. We forgot to address that before the dates.
Yeah, so the requirement is that temporary structures are in place for less than 7 months out of the year. So there is no, on a federal or state end requirement of when that time period happens. So I don't know how you actually put that in there. It's just that once you reach that deadline, they would have to come out regardless of when they go in. That's your time period. But in theory, I mean, people are gonna go out there in April, so, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So that's your.
I'll go out in November.
it is the same standard that applies to floating structures.
To all other temporary structures, yeah.
So none of those have specific hard and fast date requirements. That 7-month standard is
Yeah.
the reference.
Gotcha.
The onus being on I assume, the property owner to abide by that.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
TDT discussed to you where it was gonna be stored.
So yeah, it's stored, it's either, I mean, he said it's gonna either be stored on brackets on the side of the permanent structure or carried or somehow sent down to the boathouse on the hook,
Gotcha.
one of the two places.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts on?
No, I mean, it seems like those requirements are, I mean, if we take the same approach we did before, like those are covered by other regulatory processes.
Paul?
I was really, fine with what was written here and presented to us for suggestions by Paul Demers. Do you have any other concerns, comments, or
I just was looking at.
Yeah.
The common sense of where do you put these things when you're hauling them off? There's nothing that would prevent you from storing them on top of the existing, permanent structure and fastening. You don't want them to become debris, or waterborne debris, but having them out of the hazard area, that's all I was looking at, or secure it somewhere.
I mean, here's a question, which is, do the state requirements drive where those materials can be placed when they're not in the place they're in for temporarily?
They aren't gonna say, I want them in Aaron's garage.
No, but in other words, they have to be removed from the floodplain or,
Correct. They need to be secured so that they're not waterborne debris in an event.
so,
So typically temporary structures, this is a common requirement for floats, so they're stored above the height, that's astronomical high. We're well above that with this entire project. These are simply in a sand dune where they can't be permanent. So they will be stored outside of the coastal sand.
okay, so they have to be stored outside the coastal thing.
census?
Yeah, looking,
I don't have any concerns with the application package that was originally presented and then addressed tonight. And then my comments, as far as conditions of approval stand, for this one, the same as they did on the previous one.
I agree.
and I agree with that too. And so as with the other application, what I'll do is I'll draft findings of fact, conclusions of law, because I've looked at, we have a number of factors we have to look at from each ordinance provision that's applicable to this project. I think it complies with all of them. I'll summarize that in the written findings of fact and conclusions of law, which I've actually just knocked out a draft of, but need to massage it as is appropriate to this situation here. Now that we've heard all of the final testimony, and then we'll discuss that at the January 26th hearing or
In terms of
meeting.
sequence of procedures on this one, the biggest distinction being the requirement to clear the actual job site. And that's outside of the sand dune. So is a permit to clear vegetation something that the code enforcement officer can issue anytime?
Only after, in a situation like this one, after you've approved it.
Okay, I didn't know if they were, yeah,
The vegetation they're clearing is for a specific project being reviewed by you folks.
yep, so the same instead of
Same
having.
applicability on this one.
So, and this is getting, so Paul, are you getting it? Paul Demers?
No, everybody has work schedules and everybody has requirements to try to, but that's an oldish one, okay? They're not commending anybody who can walk through it today. But the effort to clear it is much easier on frozen ground.
Yeah,
And that's all I'm trying to
okay,
I agree.
find information related to is whether the removal of vegetation is something that could be authorized, and Paul gave his explanation on that.
You'll have to wait. Any other thoughts on this and before we continue this to the next meeting? On the 26th of January? All right, we'll continue both of these hearings, with the public hearings closed, for the next meeting, which will, review and adopt finding fact conclusions of law and vote on all the factors and on the decision. And we're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, motion to adjourn.